found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. The Chicago Bulls are still under 500. And I'm going to tell you today why the 500 mark really should not matter to fans as much as what it does, especially in this season. We're also going to look at the week ahead for the Chicago Bulls, and the Bulls bring the woo back. Javonte Green is a Chicago Bull once again. We're going to talk about all and more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedon and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. My name is Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bears Central. And let's go ahead and get into it. So the last time me and Pat we're on the show, the Bulls were one game below 500. We were asking the question, can the Bulls get to 500 again in the game against the Houston Rockets? And the Bulls went on to lose both games since that time to the Houston Rockets and to the Boston Celtics. The Bulls sit once again 3 games below 500. Now, there's a couple of different reasons why, right? When you look at this, once again, the Chicago Bulls, they just don't stand up to the moment. When you look at in that game against the Houston Rockets specifically, that was one of those games where the Bulls, they were in the game at points in times. They did have a chance to win that game, but it was just execution down the stretch. The Houston Rockets in that game just really seemed to want it more. And then when you look at the Boston Celtics, of course, the best team per record in the NBA, the Bulls just didn't have it. When you look at the second chance points that we gave up against the Boston Celtics, and the three-point shots, right? The discrepancy from three-point range, that Boston Celtics team scored 63 points out off the three-point line alone. And that leads us back to kind of the things that really hurt this Bulls team right now. That is, rebounding in key moments. Even though we're a really good rebounding team, it seems like always those momentum-changing rebounds, those rebounds you kind of look to gain momentum down the stretch of a tough game we just don't have. And then our defense, the Bulls' defense over this month of March has been one of, I think, the third worst defense in the NBA over that stretch. And so it's just those things really. And it's at this point, it's built into the roster, right? We're not a roster that has a lot of rim protection. The rim protection we kind of really would like to see a little bit more from this team. And then we just don't match the three-point shooting. And when you aren't a three-point shooting team, because we've seen teams even this season that aren't necessarily the highest volume or three-point attempts per game, you got to be effective in a couple of areas. You have to be effective on the boards. You have to win off fast break points. You got to attack the defense before they get a chance to set up. You have to be really efficient on offense yourself. And even with the three-point shots that you do make, you want to be efficient with those as well. And those are areas that really kind of hurt the Bulls a lot, right? And we're missing a few players that really would help the Bulls three-point shooting. And Patrick Williams, when you look at the percentage he shoots it at from three, even though the volume isn't quite there. And then Zach LaVine and his ability to stretch the floor as well. And that has just led to this environment and situation where the Bulls they don't really have it. And I know 500, we keep looking at that 500 mark, and me and Pat have continually said, hey, this 500 mark may not come. And it's not really about getting to 500 alone. It's about being able to stay at 500. And even if the Bulls were to get to 500 this season, in all reality, they're probably going to stay the ninth seed if that's the case anyway. So, I mean, at this point, it's more so tighten up the things that you can tighten up, specifically on that defensive side of the ball, getting Kobe White back into rhythm. 2 games back so far for Kobe White. Hasn't looked necessarily the best, but again, he avoided a major injury. That injury looked extremely nasty. And so, it's going to take some time to get back in rhythm. Yeah, Iowa's really stepped up over that time as well. We lost DeMar DeRozan in that game against the Houston Rockets. So there's a lot of things you can kind of look at and point towards that just, listen, it's going to be tough for the Bulls to get to 500. I say all that to say this. Now, the thing that the Bulls are doing right now, at least, they're maintaining their advantage over the Atlanta Hawks right now, which sit 2.5 games behind the Chicago Bulls. But with 12 games left on the season, the Bulls got to tighten some things up. And that's going to come through like kind of figuring out that defense, that rotation as well off the bench. I don't expect Javonte Green to play a whole hell of a lot. We'll talk about his return here towards the back half of the show. But I think it really comes down to those situational moments from Billy Donovan as well. In the game against the Boston Celtics, Nikola Vucevic had 2 rebounds. 2. That's just not going to cut it. And, not to say that Andre Drummond played too much better either in that game against the Boston Celtics, but he was at least rebounding the ball better. And so that situational substitutions, Billy Donovan kind of fails at. It's going to be something to really look at more closely before the season ends. But you can only fix so much over 12 remaining games, right? Some of this is just baked in to who this Bulls roster is and who they're going to be over this stretch of time. Is it unfortunate? Hell yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Because we know that the talent this team has, and we've seen this team and how they perform at times, especially defensively. We have that second gear that we are able to get into times defensively, but it seems like over the teams that just won't go away, it really hurts the Bulls a little bit more. So, like I've said before, I'm not going to ever say that I want to see my team lose. I'm not going to ever say that I want to see my team, fail down the stretch, not make it out the play-in. Because listen, I'll be the first one here, excited, screaming, if this team is able to make it out the play-in tournament. But the thing that I've been telling you guys for a while is that if the Bulls don't, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? We own our own draft pick this year. So if we don't make it out that play-in tournament, we get a lottery pick. And that's perfectly fine, right? I think when you look at specifically the position that the Bulls are of need, right, which is the center position or a big man, maybe even the power forward position, there are quite a bit of solid prospects in this draft. We know that this is a weaker draft, but if you scout right, things like that, even weaker drafts, you can still find diamonds in the rough. And I'm not saying that player needs to turn into a superstar level talent or anything like that, but you can find you a player that can start for you for years and years to come if you play it right? Khalil Ware is out there. Tyler Smith, somebody who's slated to go right towards the end of the lottery, that if the Bulls do make it, to the play-in and kind of get eliminated, I really like to see them go. He's with the G League Ignite right now, 6'11", power forward, 215 pounds. Talked a lot about Kyle Filipowski from Duke. He's a center there. So there are prospects that the Bulls really can look at that have some ready-made NBA skills that can come in and help you right away. So if the Bulls don't, make it out there playing, it's not the worst thing possible. Now, I think this team is going to fight. I think this team is going to compete. And this isn't a team that's going to back down, right, or just not try to win games. So, if they can, great. I'm not saying that they shouldn't attempt to or try to, but it just comes down to what the Bulls are missing. What's been the shortcoming of this team? Giving up corner threes. The Bulls give up the most points to an opponent generated from the corner three, which has become one of the most efficient shots in the game of basketball. And so those things all kind of combining to make a perfect storm of negativity around the Bulls are there. And I mean, as the Bulls go forward, as they face the better teams, things like that, those issues, those shortcomings are going to become louder. They're going to become more evident. They're going to become things that stick out a little bit worse, right? And then when you get these teams playing really well on the back end of the season, like your Houston Rockets team that's won 8 games in a row. I think they have the longest right now, as of this recording, winning streak in the NBA besides the Boston Celtics. When you have teams that are playing with that level of confidence, we've seen it. It's been proven every single time. It's going to give the Bulls fits. And our inability to really hold on to leads is something that stuck out this whole season. We're one of the better clutch teams in the NBA, but then when you start factoring in how many of those clutch situations we've put ourselves in, right, where if we were able to hold on to leads, they wouldn't even been technically a clutch game, right, per that stat. So, the Bulls have hurt themselves in a lot of ways. Their defense, specifically in pick and roll defense at times, the lack of adjustments, that situational rotations from Billy Donovan that fall short a lot of times as well. All those things breed a perfect scenario where the Bulls are just left, not as the clear, right, as clear cut as what we would like, even against some of the games that are supposed to be easier games on our schedule. And that's just, unfortunately, that's just where we are this season. And it's up to AK and Eversley to really see this, what our struggles over the season, and make the decision on how much of this do they feel they can realistically change this offseason, an offseason in which you're really tied up against that luxury tax. If you bring back most of the players that are free agents are up for extensions like a Patrick Williams, a DeMar DeRozan, and Andre Drummond, if you end up bringing most of those players back, that's your offseason. You're not going to be able to add a whole hell of a lot other than that in your draft pick. So this front office got some tough decisions to make here as we head towards the end of the season. And I don't know how much more of these 12 games are going to be used for evaluation. At this point, you gotta know who these players are. Of course, there are some players, the young ones, and Dalen, who's really stepped up. Got to give Dalen credit for that stretch he went on against the Boston Celtics. But yeah, there's some players here that definitely can still step up considerably and still take a step up. But you got to ask yourself just how much of that are you willing to bet on? And we'll see with that. We'll see what comes with that. But next up, though, we're going to talk about the Chicago Bulls in the week ahead, the schedule that we have the week ahead. We're basically in the last 3 weeks of the season. And so we're going to take a look at this next week up, which we have 4 games against some solid opponents at. But before we get into that, I got to talk to you guys about a couple of our sponsors. And the first one up, got to talk to you guys about Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with the 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right. With that said, I also got to talk to you guys about another one of our sponsors, and that is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Bulls fans. So with that said, I want to take a look at the week ahead for the Chicago Bulls, because this is going to be an interesting week for the Bulls, right? You know, especially with us trying to hold off the Atlanta Hawks from passing us up. And, you know, the Bulls right now have a 21% chance of making the playoffs, which is higher than the chance to be eliminated from the playoffs. They don't really, I think they have like a 2% chance of moving up to the 7th or 8th seed, which, you know, I know at one point in time, especially when we were closer to 500, it looked like that could have been a possibility for the Chicago Bulls to kind of move up and get that. It doesn't look as likely now, right? And that's perfectly fine. The Bulls just got to finish their season the best way that they can. Even with this said, if the Atlanta Hawks were to pass up the Bulls at number 9, we go to the number 10 spot. Okay, now we play on the road. The Bulls don't necessarily have the best home record. We're 18-18 at home. So it's a 500 record at home. We're worse on the road. So we'll see what that turns into for the Bulls. Now, of course, you want to play at home. Give your home crowd that opportunity to see that extra postseason game and let the chips fall where they may. But when you look at this week coming up for the Bulls, first up, we got the Washington Wizards going down tonight. And this is a team that, of course, we beat before. But this is also a team that's given us fits before. It really depends on who's going to be available. They're missing a lot of players. They've already ruled out. Kyle Kuzma's not going to play tonight. Landry Shamit's not going to play tonight. Eugene, who Vooch did the too small on, is not playing tonight. Jordan Poole is questionable. And then you have Tyus Jones also, who's already been ruled out for the Washington Wizards. But the thing with that is that we know that this Bulls team cannot take any team for granted, right? I don't care who's suited up, who's not. Yeah, the Washington Wizards are going to be missing most of their players. But let's not act like the Bulls have not gotten cooked by absolute role players on some teams before, right? So that's going to be a tough thing for the Bulls, right? So they're going to have to stand up. They're going to have to be prepared defensively to see how they can. Denny is still playing in this game. He's a player that I really do like, one of my favorite players on this Wizards team. Absolutely. But other than that, they're missing a lot of their top scorers. So, it does present the Bulls an opportunity, get back in the win column, get some momentum going. Maybe Kobe White can get, closer to being the Kobe White that we need to see on the back half of the season. But we don't have very many games left, man. We don't have very many games left. We're approaching the final 10 games left of the season. In a season that's been so up and down. It's honestly been ridiculous just how up and down the season has been for the Chicago Bulls. But 11 games left. I think I said 12 earlier. 11 games left. Get this game out the way, and then you're in your final 10 games of the season. And this is where, you want to finish strong heading into the play-in, gain some momentum where you can, and just figure some things out. And so, it's up to the coaching staff. It's up to the players to really understand what this moment is. And so, against the Washington Wizards is a game to kind of really get in tune, start your week off really solidly, right? Play really well against that team, because then you got the Pacers coming up. After that, on Wednesday, we face the Indiana Pacers. This is a team that always plays us close, whether we win or lose against the Pacers. That's never an easy game for the Chicago Bulls. We did win the last game against them. We had to go into overtime. We ended up winning that by 3. That's going to be a tough game for the Bulls. Absolutely. So they got to be on their P's and Q's defensively, especially in that game. And you're going to hope that you got everybody kind of back in rhythm with Kobe, Ayo. Everybody's kind of all on their cylinders at that point in time. Then we got the Brooklyn Nets Friday. Now, the Nets are an interesting team because right now, the Nets, I think, have lost their last 6 games. They're on a 6-game losing streak. They're 2-8 in their last 10 games. And this is a team that, in the Brooklyn Nets, that has seemed to kind of come to the realization on what their season is going to be. The fact that even though they're technically the 11th seed, they don't seem like they're going to be catching up right now. They're 5.5 games behind the Atlanta Hawks for that 10 spot, with 11 games left on the season. So, they don't have a whole hell of a lot to fight for, but you don't want to allow that team to be the one that comes in with more fight, right? Teams that are playing with house money, that season has kind of been determined. The Bulls have definitely faltered against those teams before. So that's another team that you cannot ease up or take, or that you can avoid. So when it comes down to that, you can't allow a team like that to come in and have more fight than you. And then you have the Minnesota Timberwolves in the week on Sunday. While we did beat the Timberwolves before, right? They were missing players, and they're going to still projectedly be missing players. It's still a game that we had to go into overtime to beat them when we did before, right? So all these games this week really present interesting scenarios for the Bulls, where these are not teams that you can let up on by any stretch of the imagination. You cannot come into these games lackadaisical. And that's sometimes where we see the Bulls don't always execute the way that we would like to see them execute, right? And that's really what this week has to be, right? Is this every week from now on, you got to go 500 at the minimum, right? That's what I would like to see from the Chicago Bulls over every one of these last games of the season. Is 500 needs to be the minimum for the week. We had the phrase before, kind of towards the end of last season, we said win the week. And so if you can win the week, right, which is having more wins than losses in that week, or finishing 500, which don't look at winning the week, but you didn't lose the week, don't lose these last 3 weeks. And that's really what is going to be important for the Bulls. And like I said, it's not even about getting back to 500 at this point. That's neither here nor there, because you could be at 500 and still be the 9th seed. With everything that the Bulls have faced this season, the 4-15 start, the injuries that we had all up and down, the fact that we have been playing with like a 44, 45 win season pace basically since December, all those things are great. Those you can absolutely put that in a notch in your cap. That's all great and fine and dandy. But finish the season strong, and by strong, like I said, win the week. That's all we're looking at you to do, is win the week where you can, and get your players in rhythm. Keep trusting those young players. Dalen Terry, that stretch that he had against Boston, once again, and I keep saying it, Dalen Terry keeps flashing the all-around kind of mentality that he can be, right? And that Swiss Army knife player that he has the potential to be. You want to continue seeing that. You want to continue finding that balance off the bench. But Tim, who has really kind of fallen out of the rotation, we're talking about single-digit minutes the last couple of games for the Chicago Bulls. Does he get himself back into the rotation? We need that shooting, right? For whatever reason, Billy Donovan stopped playing him and stopped trusting him at a time where Billy was trusting Tim even in kind of clutch moments. He was out there in fourth quarters. Now for him to fall out of the rotation in the manner in which he has, leaves some questions, but can he find that way back in that rotation? And you're really kind of looking at these young players for the remainder part of your season, and you're really trying to determine which one of these players are going to have a role that we're going to pencil in for having a role. You still want them to go through training camp and earn it, but you're going to look at these young players and ask yourself, which one of these guys are we betting on earning roles heading into next season? And that's really what this week, that's what every week remaining out of these last 11 games for the Chicago Bulls, that's really what we're looking at. But next up, we're going to be looking at the return of the Woo, with Javonte Green returning to the team. Before we get into that, though, we're going to talk to you guys about one of our sponsors, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy daily sports app with over 3 million members. We're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play PrizePicks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, y'all. Now, with that said, we got to get into something feel good, right? These first 2 segments haven't necessarily felt the best to talk about or been the most positive topics because it's just being real about the Chicago Bulls. So, that comes with its own positives and negatives. But the Bulls brought Javonte Green back on a 10-day contract, which a lot of Bulls fans were really excited about. Javonte Green, a player who, we're familiar with, the coaching staff knows. And that's why you saw the Bulls make that move for a 10-day contract. And some Bulls fans may ask, well, why were they able to sign Javonte Green? Well, there's a provision in the NBA that if you have at least 3 players out that are projected to miss more than 2 weeks, you get a extra roster spot that you can sign a player to. With Julian Phillips expected to miss the last 2 weeks, that allowed them the opportunity to sign Javonte Green to that 10-day contract. And the reasons why, I get it. Were there players out there still in the free agent market with more size? Yes, technically there absolutely was. But Javonte Green is familiar. You don't have to get over the learning curve if you have to play him. He's already familiar with the system. He knows that. Billy Donovan knows him. He's familiar with the players. There's chemistry there already. So, Javonte, a player who the Bulls did not retain in the offseason, mainly due to his injury concern. He's been spending most of the season rehabbing with the Golden State Warriors G League team. And the Bulls, basically allowed that time. And once they had that extra roster spot, they reached out to Javonte and brought him back home. So this gives the Bulls him for 10 days, which they've that was like 2 or 3 days now at this point. We'll basically have him for basically the remainder of this week. And I won't be surprised if they give him a second 10-day contract, especially with the Julian Phillips injury. And that's what really that signifies to me, is that Julian Phillips is going to be out some time. And maybe the Bulls aren't as confident as Julian Phillips returning this season as maybe what they once were. And I'm not reporting on that, but that's just kind of speculation and thought process in my head. And adding Javonte Green, he averaged about 11 to 12 points down in the G League. So, he proved himself to be healthy. And if you do play him, he's going to be an energy guy. Billy Donovan already said his first game back was against Boston. They already pointed to and said, hey, it's not a high chance that he's going to play in this game. And he didn't play. And that's even with Alex Caruso going down at one point. He was able to tape up the ankle. He came back. Don't expect Javonte Green to play a lot for the Chicago Bulls on this 10-day contract. He's there kind of as a depth piece, has some insurance if you do need to play him. But it seems like Billy Donovan is content at playing the young guys at this point, right? Playing, OB, not a whole lot of minutes. Dalen Terry's getting a lot more minutes now. And Andre Drummond. Those are your main 3 players coming off the bench. We didn't see Javon Carter in the last, I think, 2 games, if I'm not mistaken. So, when that comes down to, that's what Javonte is. But it does feel good to bring Javonte Green back to this team, right? It does feel good to do that. He's somebody that a lot of Bulls fans wish that we hadn't let walk away. Again, the injury was kind of the biggest reasoning for that more than anything else. The Bulls basically let Javonte Green go out, rehab somewhere else, get paid for the season, right? And then we brought him back to be here. And that's a great story. Everybody loves to see Javonte back in a Bulls uniform, see him back on the sidelines, doing the silly dance and things like that. So, that's really what that signing is. I don't want to make it seem like it's more than what it is, because I just don't think we're going to see Javonte play a whole hell of a lot for the Chicago Bulls. Now, if he does play, we know he brings energy. We know he brings defense. We know he's gonna be able to get deflections, all things that help the Chicago Bulls team get the wins we need to see on the back half of the season. But he's just not projected to be somebody who's gonna play a whole heck of a lot for the Bulls. But glad to have Wu back in the building, back in the UC, back in the red and black, and that's it's not a feel good way to end this show, man. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you're following. You can follow us collectively at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me at CEO Haize. You can follow Pat the Designer at Pat the Designer. But yeah, that's it, man. For us, Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube and the Odyssey app. For Pat the Designer, I'm Haize. This has been Locked On Bulls, and we out, y'all. Peace.